Good morning. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We'll give people a couple minutes to come in. Good morning. Good morning. We're going to get started in just a second. We'll get started in just 1 minute. So, good morning. Good morning. I am Dr. Johnson, and I would like to welcome you to UBU Outreach Lifewater Inc. The vision and mission of Lifewater is to bring hope to humanity by connecting with the community. And one way to do that is to have programs or presentations like this. As you can tell, Dr. May isn't on with us today. He's fine. But I will be leading the presentation today. If I would like for you, if you have any comments, if you want to share feedback, or even if you have questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the comments. And at the end of the presentation, I'll make sure that I address your question. So please feel free to ask any questions. Also, make sure you share. Please share it with your friends, your family members, so that they can also join. On last month, our last presentation was about love languages. And one of the things that a lot of us spoke about in the comments, as well as during the presentation, was all about communication. So we decided to do the presentation today on communication. So please make sure that you take notes. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments and I'll make sure that I answer them at the end of the presentation. Also, please don't forget to share. So let's go ahead and get started. So when you think about communication, communication is actually what binds us to other people. When you think about it, communication is the most important factor of a relationship, whether it's a relationship with a family member, a spouse, your boss, your children, with everyone, communication is key. So before we talk about the different forms of communication, I want to talk about some issues that prevent us from having good relationships. So the first thing is sometimes we fail to actively listen to the person who is speaking. Sometimes we often make assumptions, even though we're listening to the person or we hear the person, we're not actually listening to them and we make assumptions. We oftentimes interrupt the speaker because we feel like we have something more important to say, or we respond to people to defend ourselves without actually listening. The next one is use statements. So use statements are when we're speaking with someone and we don't use what we call our language. Our language is what we use when we're trying to convey a message about our own thoughts and feelings. Instead of saying, you did this or you made me feel this way, it's important that you make sure you use our language in terms of saying, I think or I feel. And we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. The next one is emotional responses. Sometimes we don't listen to what people are saying because we become overly emotional. And because we become overly emotional, we don't actually take in what the other person is trying to communicate. The next one is misinterpretations. We may hear what a person is saying, but because we're not actively listening, we make up our own stories or we make up what we think they're saying instead of clarifying it. The next one is indirect statements. So sometimes we're not clear about what someone is saying, or we're not clear with what we're actually saying. And then the last one is avoidance. We oftentimes avoid difficult conversations. We oftentimes avoid having those conversations that may lead to confrontation or disagreement. So today I want to talk to you all about the 4 communication styles. So there are 4 communication styles that are considered the common communication styles. So you have passive communication, you have aggressive communication, you have passive aggressive, and then you have what we consider the golden standard of communication, which is assertive. So we're going to actually go through each one of these and talk about how to characterize them, as well as some tips on how to be more assertive. So I have a profile of these different types of communicator. And as I'm going through these, I want you to pay attention to which profile do you fit. Which profile do you fit? And it's important to know that you may notice that you are a passive communicator in one environment and maybe not in the other. Or you may be more passive with one person and not with the other. So I want you to just pay attention to where you may fall. So the profile of a passive communicator. This is the communicator who always, no matter what, puts the needs of others before their own. They put the needs of others before their own. This is also the person who doesn't really express their personal opinions or desires. It's all about others. They're always going to put themselves last. This is the person who usually lacks confidence within the relationship. They're usually quiet, they're usually soft spoken, and they're just agreeable. They're going to agree with everything that the other person says or does. And they're going to be apologetic without a cause. So the passive communicator is usually someone who simply wants to avoid any type of disagreement or any type of confrontation. So communication is a scale. So on one end of the scale, you have passive communication, and then on the other end, you have aggressive communication. So aggressive communication is the direct opposite of a passive communicator. This is the person who puts their own needs before others. They're unwilling to compromise. They're usually disrespectful, and they usually use a very condescending tone when they're speaking to other people. They're not willing to listen to what the other person has to say. They're usually very impulsive and they're easily frustrated. So, again, this is the direct opposite of passive communication. So, what happens when you put passive and aggressive together? What happens when you put them together? Now, I want to point out that passive aggressive communication is actually the most common type of communication. It's usually the communication pattern that most people are comfortable showing. So this is where the communicator denies their true feelings. They're oftentimes sarcastic and they engage in very subtle aggression. So you don't really notice right off the bat that they're being aggressive, but the more you think about it and the more you look into it, they're actually being aggressive. They're just not as loud as just the aggressive communicator. They will appear to cooperate, but they'll silently want to get even. And most importantly, their feelings and actions will not match. So this is usually the person who may agree to do something, but they complain. Or they may actually sabotage the situation because they're not in alignment. Their feelings and actions aren't in alignment. And again, this is the most common form of communication. So if you feel that you fall into this category, or if you know other people who do, make sure that you pay attention to the fact that the feelings and actions are not in alignment. So the golden standard of communication, this is an assertive communicator. This is what I try to help my clients learn and practice. Because assertive communication, this is the act of putting yourself first, but not at the expense of others. And what I mean by that is this is the person who is going to state what they need and want in a respectful way. So they're not going to be aggressive. They're going to do it in a very respectful way. This is the person who clearly expresses how they feel. They also stand up for their rights. And they oftentimes, but not oftentimes, they always listen without interruption. So they're not going to interrupt the person who is speaking to get a point across. They're actually going to take the time to listen. This is the person who respects the opinions of other people. So again, although they're putting themselves first, they're also going to be respectful of what other people have to say. They do not allow people to manipulate them. And most importantly, they're willing to compromise if possible. If it's possible and if it's not at the expense of their own needs, then they will compromise. But again, that's only if it's not at the expense of their needs. And then last, this is the communicator who's simply confident. They're actually very confident. So they're going to make sure that they say what it is that they need to say, but they're also going to be respectful of the other person. So how can one be more assertive, or how can you actually be assertive? The first thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is to use I statements. So I statements is when you're communicating with someone, you make sure that you're taking responsibility for your feelings and thoughts. So for example, let's say that you are feeling disrespected, or you feel as if someone is hurting you. If you go into that conversation and you say, well, you made me do this, or you made me feel this way, that person can easily say, no, that's not true. I didn't do that. You're going to put them on defense mode. Now, if you use I statements, then they can never take away your true feelings or your true thoughts. So if you, instead of saying you made me feel this way, you may say something to the effect of, I felt disappointed when that happened, or I felt disrespected at the time. The person can still deny it, but they can't take away that that was your experience. So the next way to be assertive is to express yourself in a calm manner. If you respond to someone in a calm way, they're more likely to hear you out versus if you come at them in a very disrespectful way. So an assertive communicator is always calm in their approach. You want to say no when needed. Saying no is the ultimate key to being assertive, because if you feel that you have to say no, then you definitely need to say it. You also may want to rehearse what you would like to express. Being assertive isn't easy. It becomes easier the more you practice it. But until you get completely comfortable, it's okay to rehearse what you would like to say. So for example, if you know you have a difficult conversation come up, it's okay to sit down and think about, okay, here's how I'll say it. You may want to write it out. You may want to practice it with a friend or a family member. But it's perfectly okay to rehearse what it is that you would like to express. The assertive communicator also pays very close attention to their body language as well as their tone. Again, when you're assertive, you do everything in a respectful manner. And last but not least, the best way to be assertive is to practice 3 C's. You want to be confident, you want to be clear, and you also want to appear very controlled. You want to be in control of your emotions, of your thoughts, and of your behaviors. So be confident, clear, and controlled. So here's some examples of assertive statements. The first one is simple. It just simply says no. Oftentimes when we say no to people, we try to give an excuse, or we try to dress it up and make it sound better, but you can actually just say no. Now the difference is, if there's something that you're willing to compromise and it's not going to be an issue for you, then you can add something to that, but actually saying no is enough. The next one says, thanks, but I'm not able to do that at the moment. Can I get back with you at a later time? So this is an example of someone asking you to do something, but you simply just don't have the time or you don't have the bandwidth to do it. So in this statement, the person they do say thanks, but I'm not able to do it. So they're saying no, but they're willing to get back with them later in case something changes. The next one says, I feel disrespected and would like to talk about it when I'm more calm. As you can tell, there's our language there. I feel disrespected and would like to talk about it when I'm more calm. So they're letting the person know this is how I feel about what's happening right now, but I need to address it later because right now I'm not calm. And the last one says, I understand that you need a ride, but my schedule is full today. Are you able to catch an Uber? So as you can tell, the person acknowledges the person's needs. I understand that you need a ride, but my schedule is full. So therefore I'm not going to be able to do it. And they even offer a suggestion or they offer a different alternative because they know that they can't help them. So what are the benefits of being assertive? Again, assertive communication is considered the golden standard of communication. This is what we all should strive to be. Sometimes it may be easier to be passive. Sometimes it may be easier to be aggressive. And sometimes it may be easier to be passive aggressive. But all of those forms of communication oftentimes present issues within relationships. This is usually where people are able not getting their needs met and they're not helping the other person within the relationship, or it turns into a very toxic situation, or it may turn into a situation where there are no boundaries. And it's very difficult when there are no boundaries within a relationship. So the benefits of being assertive, the first one is increased self-esteem and confidence. The more assertive you are in a situation, or within a relationship, the more confident you are. And the reason you become so confident is because, again, you're standing up for yourself, you're speaking up for yourself. The next one is increased emotional awareness and expression. Again, assertive communicators, they fully express themselves. They express themselves. They also, again, the thing about assertiveness is not only are you expressing yourself, you're also taking into account what the other person is saying or feeling. So this actually helps you to be more aware of your own emotions as well as the other person. The next one is the more assertive you are, the more respect you get from other people. The next one is having firm boundaries. If you're assertive, then you're going to set clear boundaries that people are going to be willing to respect. So the more firm you are and the more likely that you keep your boundaries in place, people will learn to respect them, even if they disagree. They may disagree, but that's okay. The more you implement your boundaries, the more they're going to respect you. I'll give you an example from my own life. I I have this anybody who's ever worked with me, they oftentimes joke that at 12 p.m. I literally shut down. I leave the office and I go on my lunch break. No matter what's happening at 12 o'clock, I am completely shutting down. And I'll never forget my last job. My first day, I told the secretary, never schedule anybody between the hours of 12 and 1 because I won't be here. I'm never going to see a client between 12 and 1. And she understood it. But then a couple months later, as I'm going on my lunch, she comes and tells me that my 11 o'clock showed up late and they were wondering if I could see them at 12. And I said, no, I can't do it. I won't see anybody between 12 and 1. They'll have to reschedule. And she was completely shocked by it because usually I'm a pretty flexible person where I try to accommodate people. But again, I knew that if I would have agreed to see that person at that time, not only would I have lost my lunch hour because I had a client at 1, I would have also been letting go of a very firm boundary that I set in place, not only for myself, but for other people to know this is my time and I'm not going to negotiate it. I have to go. And at that moment, I felt a little bad about it. But the more I thought about it, I understood that I needed to be firm in that boundary, because once you let go of your boundaries, people will continue to break them. So you want to make sure that you are firm in the boundaries that you're setting. Another benefit of being assertive is having improved communication. The more assertive you are with people in your life, the more they're going to communicate their needs and their wants. Everything is just going to be a lot more healthy when you are assertive in your communication. The next one is having honest and balanced relationships. So if you're being assertive, you're constantly sharing your true thoughts, feelings. So therefore, your relationship is going to be more honest and it's going to be more balanced, because you're not going to allow other people to take advantage of you, and you're not going to take advantage of other people either. And then, of course, the last one is having effective decision making skills. And the reason that's so important is because when you are assertive, it helps you to think clearly about whatever situation may be at hand. So at this time, I would like, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Therefore, I can address the question. Or if you have some feedback that you would like to share, I would love to see your feedback. If you have any questions about communication, about the different types of communication, as well as if you have any questions about how to be assertive, or if you just have some feedback that you want to share, please feel free to put that in the chat box. Any questions, feedback? And I'll go back to the slide about tips on how to be assertive. Thank you, Miss Brandy. Any questions, feedback? And while we're waiting to see if we have any questions, I would love to get some suggestions on what are some other topics that you all would like me to bring to UBU. What are some different topics or um, I guess things that you would like to learn a little bit more about as it relates to mental health, relationships? Like, what are some different things? I would love to take your suggestions. Thank you, Miss Lewis. Thank you. Any suggestions on things that you would like for us to talk about next time or in the future? You know, so far we talked about love languages. Of course, today, assertive communication. We've talked about self-care. We've also talked about suicide prevention and just mental health awareness. So what are some other topics that you would like me to bring to UBU that we can all talk about and sort of learn about? Okay. Coping with pandemic stresses. Okay, that's a great topic. I'll write that down. Talking about coping with the pandemic and stress management. Okay. Thank you, Miss Brandy. Any other topics? Pandemic has definitely caused a lot of stress for us. So I think that'll be a great topic. Okay. Mr. Paul said that talk about depression and anxiety. Okay. Okay. Just talking about what depression and anxiety are, as well as some, I guess, coping skills or treatments. Okay. That's a great topic. Any other suggestions? I think maybe in our first one, I think someone asked us to talk about grief, and maybe that's also something that we can do. Or did we already do grief? Any future topics or any questions about the presentation today? Okay. Self-esteem. That's a good one. Okay. Self-esteem and confidence. We talked a little bit about self-esteem with the youth, and I think that'll be an awesome topic for the adults as well. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morris. Thank you. Thank you all so much for being here. Okay. And I do see where we did agree for the in-person group, but not the virtual group. Okay, so maybe I can just make sure that I bring that to you all for those of you who aren't able to be present at that particular group. Well, thank you all so much for being here, and I hope that something was shared today that was helpful. I definitely will be looking forward to bringing some of the topics, or at least incorporating all of the topics that you all mentioned today, with coping with the pandemic stressors, talking a little bit more in depth about depression and anxiety, grief, as well as self-esteem. I'm definitely looking forward to that, and just talking about also relationships. Okay, talking about relationships and maybe just answer some questions about relationships. I would love for us to just have dialogue about different things that you've been experiencing or just questions that you may have. So again, thank you all so much for being present. Please make sure that you, once this is, once it ends, you can go back and share it still, just so that other people can receive the information as well. Thank you, Mr. Morris, for going back and watching. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate it, and I'll definitely be looking forward to next month's presentation. Any final questions or future topics before we go? No, again, thank you all so much for being present, and I'll definitely be looking forward to joining UBU again next month. You all have a great weekend, and again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you.